Currency issuers versus currency users. In any modern economy, there is an important distinction to be made between currency issuers and currency users. Currency issuers are governments that issue their own currency by decree of the state and are the only legal source of their currency. These currency issuing governments have a monopoly on the supply of currency and usually operate within a floating exchange system. That is, the value of the currency is not fixed against a resource like gold or valued against another foreign currency. This means that the currency issuing government can pay any debt owing in its currency and is never financially constrained because it can always create more currency. As we have explained previously, currency issuing governments are only constrained by the amount of resources available to create goods and services in an economy. But if there is ever an oversupply of currency relative to the amount of available goods and services, inflation will occur. Currency issuers include Australia, Japan, China, the United Kingdom and the United States, to name a few. The Australian federal government is the only legal source of the Australian dollar. This may take the form of coins, printed bills, or digital dollars known as reserves that exist as electronic entries on digital bank balance sheets. You or I cannot create or issue the Australian dollar. This privilege is available only to the Australian federal government. So currency users are everyone else in the economy that does not have the capacity to create or issue these Australian dollars. Currency users include households, individuals, businesses, and in Australia, local, state and territory governments. This means that unlike the federal government, everyone else is constrained by debt because they cannot simply issue new currency to pay off their debts and must therefore balance their budget or run a surplus. When a currency user runs out of money, they must borrow or earn more money to pay their debts or risk going bankrupt. As has been explained, this is never the case for a currency issuing government that creates its own currency and operates within a floating exchange system. A currency issuer can always pay its debts in its own currency and can never go bankrupt. However, some national governments can choose to give up their monetary sovereignty by either adopting a foreign currency or by pegging or fixing their currency to a foreign currency. In the past, countries often pegged the value of their currency to gold or other finite resources. By doing this, these governments placed a constraint on their own spending ability, the constraint being the value of the limited amount they owned of that resource. In the case of Europe, EU members voluntarily surrendered their own sovereign currency, whether it be France's franc, Germany's Deutschmark or Greece's drachma, when it entered the European Monetary Union and replaced it with the euro. This meant that these countries can be in a position where they can no longer pay all debts they owe because they are no longer the currency issuer. They have become currency users of the euro, which can only be created by the European Central Bank. This has meant that these EU member states have become financially constrained by the Union and in some cases, like Greece, can become unable to pay their debts. Likewise, some developing economies may decide to peg their local currency to a foreign currency, like the US dollar or the euro. In 2003, Venezuela pegged their local currency, the bolivar, to the US dollar, which meant that they were financially vulnerable to fluctuations in the market and found themselves in the same position as other currency users when an inevitable price shock came. In Venezuela's case, their main export was oil, and they sold it for US dollars. When the price of oil plummeted, Venezuela found itself with debt owed in a foreign currency, the US dollar. This meant that it could not cover this debt as it was not the currency issuer of US dollars. This price shock led to hyperinflation. As discussed in previous videos, money is simply tradable debt, and the government that issues its own currency cannot owe a debt in that currency to itself. District or local governments within the sovereign nation do not issue the currency, and so are currency users, just like everyone else. State, council and local governments must manage their economies in a similar fashion to businesses and private citizens. Federal governments with the power to create their own currency are not bound by these constraints and have the power to pay any debt owed in their currency at any time. These subtle but important differences to modern currencies are imperative to understanding the real constraints on any economy in the world. Comment to join the conversation or subscribe for more videos.